Hi guys, in this video we are going to look at common mistakes which you should avoid. In total we are going to be looking at around 8 mistakes. So let's dive into it. I've prepared 2 scenarios. In one scenario we will cover 4 common mistakes and in the other we will cover 3 to 4. So in my scenario here, each route represents a common mistake, and we will go route by route and I will comment on the mistakes. So in the first route and the first challenge we are going to be facing is the fact that when you map, sometimes you can mismap seemingly same variables. So here on purpose I'm setting a variable called test with value x. Here I'm setting another variable called test with value epsilon. And here I'm just setting final variable and I'm choosing one of the variables from here. Now the common issue which we do see is the fact that users sometimes mix the variables in their mappings, especially when the variables are called exactly the same. So if you are using one app within your scenario very often, then you will see the same variables in the mapping panel here, right? The same names, the same friendly names, so to speak. And then once you do mapping, it's possible that sometimes you will map incorrect one. So for example, let's say you wanted to map the variable from this module number 2, but you did not read properly the name of the module here and the ID, and you just map number 3. So instead of getting x as the result of this variable, you are getting epsilon, because in fact you are pulling the value from here. So it's very important to pay attention not only to the names of your variables and names within your mappings, but it's extremely important to also pay attention to the module IDs within those variables which you are using. So originally I wanted to map this first one, not this one. So in order to fix my issue, I will just remap the correct one, that's still the test variable, but from the module number 2. So in real life, when you are having a scenario with many Google Sheets modules and you're just mapping lots and lots of Google Sheets variables, this can frequently happen that you see the column name, you would think that it's from that module you want it to be the source of your variable, but in fact you are just mapping something else. So pay attention to this one. It's also happening to me all the time. Over to the next common mistake. I'm going to disable my previous route and I'm going to enable this one. For this exercise, we are going to use the classroom data, which you should be familiar with by now. And the mistake which we've been frequently seeing is that users are incorrectly mapping items which are nested in an array. So when we look at the output of this module, we can see that there are keys such as JSON description, last JSON update, current date time, but then we have this array here with 2 classes in it, with class A and class B. And then we even have another array within those arrays. So we have members within class A and members within class B. And frequently, when you are mapping your variables from the preceding modules, you will map an array. And then you will seemingly map a key from that array. So if I simply mapped it like this, what's going to happen? Well, I'm always going to get the first class name, because this is what you get when you map something from an array. So here we have the mapping and here we have the result. So if it's class A, but in reality, there were actually 2 classes. And now it's up to you to tell whether this mapping is actually correct or whether you may want it to first iterate through the array and only then start mapping the items from that array. And I would say most of the time when you work with arrays, you actually want to iterate through them. So just a reminder how to tell something is an array. You can identify arrays by looking at the name of the variable and by finding the square brackets at the end. If the square brackets are there, it means it's an array. And in that case, you should consider whether you need to iterate through that array or not. So in my case, if I wanted to see all class names, I would first need to iterate through the data through school classes. Let's see what we have here. We have just a safeguard filter here saying that continue forward if JSON description exists, which will be always valid in my case. And then I don't want to map the items coming from the HTTP module, but in fact, I want to map the class name resulting from the iteration. So let's run the scenario now. And unlike before, I am now getting both class names, not just the first one. So I'm getting class A and class B. It's very important to understand what needs to happen with your arrays, whether you are really okay not to iterate through your array and have a mapping like this and accepting the fact that you will always get just the first item, just the first class name from that array, or for example, the second one, which you can just set like this. But at the end of the day, you would always get just one value. And you need to decide whether the result which this mapping will give you, whether it's actually what you need for the rest of your scenarios. Let's move to another issue, the third one. So sometimes when you are working with your scenario, you will, for example, decide that this module needs to go to the beginning of the scenario, and it will be actually the first module of the scenario. And notice the filter I'm having here. So I'll just disconnect the module, then I will drag it here, I will drag the clock icon over to module to designate it as the first module in the scenario, and then I will link it to the subsequent modules. And what's going to happen now? So first of all, the mapping doesn't work, right? So that's the first thing I will need to fix. But let's say I will just arbitrarily set a class name which will be called class C. And then everything looks good. But as soon as I run the scenario, I will encounter an issue. So let's go. Now we can see this error. Invalid reference in filter 00 on link test filter. Yes, I do agree this error is not that helpful, but the issue here is that there is a filter associated with this first module. We just don't see it. And as we know from the previous courses, the filters are always associated to the first module behind them. So for example, when I take a set variable module again, and I use it as the first one now, I will be able to identify that filter. It's basically an orphan filter, which is not filtering anything, but it's causing this scenario error. And it might be very hard to understand, or it might be very hard to figure out what's causing this error, because when you look at your scenario and there is no first module in front of the failing filter, everything looks good, right? And it would just keep running it and running it and running it, and you just don't understand what's happening. Okay, so the way to fix it is very simple. You just add a module, link it, then from here you would remove the module, and then you could remove this helper module, and off you go. And now when we run the scenario, no more errors. This one was a tricky one, but now you know what to look for when you see the 00 error mentioning filters. We are going to look at the order of routes behind a router and what implications it can have on your scenario where your order is not set correctly. In this sample, I am again getting my classroom data, so it's still the same as before. So the data is there, school classes, we all know that, okay? And what I want to do is that I want to get the maximum age of my students, so the person with the highest age, as well as the person with the lowest age. So what I need to do first is that I need to iterate through the classes, and then within those classes, I need to iterate through the members. And then I'm using the numeric aggregator to find the max value from all the classes. So I am aggregating all the way to iterator 9. And then at the end of this route, I'm setting a variable called max. And I do the similar thing for minimum age. Okay? And then as a final step, I want to take these variables and work with them here in a different route. And I get the variables here, so I get the max and min from here and from here. And then I may want to compile a simple sentence. And the sentence will be max age in the school is this. The min age is this. Now, this is obviously going to work fine because we find the max age, which is 27. The min age is 15. So we were able to retrieve max and min. And then finally, we were able to compile this sentence. So all good. But what happens when the order of routes behind your router is not set correctly? So let's run a little experiment here. I will unlink this module and relink it. So when you open the scenario, it would look like this, and you would guess that this route will go first, right? Because it's at the top, and this route would go at the second, and hence you should get the same result. So let's run it. Now, the thing is that we were wrong. Why we were wrong? Because no matter what we see here, we should always auto-align the scenario to understand the true order of routes behind the router. Because at this point, we are trying to get a value which is not existing yet, because this route was actually executed as first, and this route was second. So we try to get the max value and the min value, but there was nothing to get because they simply don't exist yet when this goes first and this goes second. So it's extremely important to understand the order of routes behind your router, because it can break your scenario completely, and you can be staring into your scenario for hours and hours until you realize that my order of routes is actually not correct, and despite the fact that it looks okay, it's not. Remember to always auto-align your scenario, especially when the order of routes behind your router matters. And then you can save a lot of time on potential troubleshooting. And as a reminder, I know we've talked about this a lot in previous levels, but the order of routes behind your router is based on the order in which you originally linked your routes. So if I linked this route to the router first, it's going to go first. And if I link this as second route, it's going to go second. So when I reorder the scenario, it's going to show me the correct order of the future executions. Let's now look at the common mistake number 4, and that is about having correct data types set in your filters. And again, we've partially touched on this topic in previous levels, but I really want to be very explicit about it because it's very important. So in this use case, we are going to get, again, our classroom data, then we are going to iterate through the classes, and then we are going to iterate through the members of those classes. And at the end, we want to get the name of a student with a specific email. So we want to look at joe@doe.com, and we want to find, or we want to set the name of this student as a variable. So let's run the scenario now. And now we can see everything work, and his name is Joe. So all good. But let's say I was not paying any attention here, And I, for example, used equal to from numeric operators because I was rushing through building my scenario. I saw equal to, I just set it here. I did not really focus on the data type, and I just left the filter, closed it, and now I'm running my scenario, and it doesn't work. You are again left wondering, okay, why is it not working? My filter is so simple, like, what's the deal? And then only minutes and minutes later, sometimes hours and hours later, you will realize that your filter is actually not set correctly because you did not select a filter from the correct data type group. So when you are dealing with texts, you need to use the text filters and text operators. When you are dealing with numbers, you have to go for the numeric group. When you are working with dates and times, you have to go either for date times or time. Pay attention to this. It's very important, and sometimes having an incorrect filter set in your scenario makes it look like the scenario just stopped working for no reason, and the only thing which just magically will make it work again is setting a correct filter. So I'm going to switch it back to equal to from text operators, and everything will be fine again. So let's run my scenario, and we can see that we were able to identify that the name of the student with this email is Joe because the filter worked here. So that's for the importance of having correct data types in your filters.